So we're just wrapping up our return fuel system installations, fast intentions twin turbo kit. You follow me here. Fuel filter is underneath the chassis. Fast intentions provides a bracket, insulated clamp, and then we've got our flex fuel kit here, which goes on the front of the filter. And then after we get all this plumbed and everything, we'll go ahead and mount our analyzer and run our wiring up through the fender underneath the battery box, run that into the ECU where the passenger kick panel is. So we're going to go ahead and get our insulated clamps on over here to secure our line. Unlike the CJM kit, this kit runs on the outside of the chassis. The CJM usually will run on the inside and up through to the bell housing. So this kit's just a little different. Always just want to make sure that the lines are protected from heat. Intentions provides these clamps so that it's all secure and it's not going to move, not going to get close to the wheel and tire. And we're going to add a couple more over here. And then finally, it's going to go to the block on the stock fuel line adapter. We're almost there and we're almost ready to get this thing fired up. All right, guys, so we've got our main feed line run up that was running on the outside of the chassis, and it's gonna go to our little block, our adapter that goes to the factory feed line, then that feeds the stock rails. So we're gonna have our line like this, so it looks nice and clean and symmetrical. We'll get this bad boy tightened up. And then after we get this tightened up, we're gonna finish up the wiring for the pump. This car is gonna run just one Walbro Hellcat pump. So we've installed our SPAL relay. We have our wires going back to the pump, the CJM top hat. All we need to do now is get our ground and get our fusible link to the positive off the battery, okay? We do that, get a good base tune in there, get all our fluids in, and it's off to the races with this bad boy. Excited, always excited to see the project come to life after a lot of nice, detailed work. All right, guys, so on this Z with the Fast Intentions kit, we're gonna be doing ECU controlled boost. So we're gonna be using one of our kits, ready to go, plug and play. We have the wastegate set up for twin port external wastegate. So you can see our configuration is for port 1 and for port 2. Port 3 is gonna be vent to atmosphere. It's got a nice little cool filter on the front, so nothing can get inside the solenoid. So this is how you get the kit based on how you are gonna plumb it. So on our website, you have the option to tell us if it's a single port external, twin port external, or an internally gated setup. Comes with a really nice bracket, a little rubber isolator. So the cool thing with this is we're gonna mount this against the firewall, and this will absorb any of the vibration that the solenoid may create when it's working, when it's pulsing. So it's just like a fuel injector, a solenoid. This thing can buzz around. So this is gonna help prevent from any of the noise and vibration going through. We'll go ahead and get our Allens in there. Cool thing is this little bracket has the threaded holes in it already. We'll get those started up using a 2.5 millimeter Allen. And then last thing I like to do is just use a little bit of the green Loctite. This is a penetrating Loctite. So all you do is add it a little bit. You can see it just comes out really quick, very liquidy form. It's designed to kind of work its way through the threads. And we don't want to use red or anything like that. I mean, you can use red or blue, but these are really small threads. You don't need anything super heavy duty to do that with. Got them snugged up. We'll wipe this down, and then we're gonna go ahead and mount this. So we have our washer and our nylock nut that we're gonna use. So let's go ahead and we'll do that next. All right, so this was designed so that it bolts right through this existing hole in the firewall. Really nice and clean, simple. I like the way it's kind of configured. We are using our boost reference off of this driver side intercooler pipe that goes with the throttle body. So under here, we have our fitting that's going to provide our boost signal. And as mentioned before, right in the back center, really easy to get to. Now that we have to do all the plumbing, we have our twin connections here, our twin signal ports going to the wastegates, left to right. Really nice, super clean. So literally your signal hose is going to be really short, which has an advantage. And we're going to have also our hoses just come straight off of here, off of this. So really easy, clean to do. Hole is already there for you. You're just going to mount it right through there, and we'll use our provided hardware. We'll get it tightened up, and it'll basically just sit just like that. And you have enough length with the harness to go to your connector that goes to the back of the solenoid, and then we'll start to run our vacuum lines and our boost reference lines, I should say, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're gonna get started with our routing for our boost signal from the solenoid itself. So I'm gonna start at the very bottom of the solenoid now, which is essentially port number 2. That's going to go to the top of the wastegates. So I have this labeled pretty easily over here, just the way we have it all nice and routed. This is gonna go to the top ports. Again, everything's nice and equal from left to right. We're gonna leave it with a little bit of slack, and then we'll go ahead and we'll zip tie everything in place. All right, this next one, we're gonna go right off of our boost reference, our signal, which is underneath this charge pipe. And the other thing we're gonna need to do is we have to tee it. So this port gets a tee that's going to run from the boost signal to the side ports of the wastegate, and also to our boost reference in on the solenoid, which is gonna be port number 1, which right now is on the top. You wanna make sure nothing's kinked, otherwise you're not gonna be getting your boost signal. And also, if some of you guys are running some of those mid-mount kits, you wanna make sure you keep these hoses away from the heat. It's a little tougher to route those setups just because of the length, and you're gonna have to run stuff through the exhaust. So if it's gonna get really close, you wanna make sure that you have some sort of heat protection in place, like some of that fire sleeve and heat wrap. So nice and clean. We'll go ahead and zip tie all this stuff, and that's it. So we have our boost reference, goes into a T, splits off, goes into port number 1. The other side of that T goes into our other T that splits off and goes to the side ports of our wastegates. And finally, the out of the solenoid, which is port number 2, is going to the T that splits off and goes to the top of the wastegates. And there you have it. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get our cooling system vacuum filled. So that way we make sure there's no air in the system. You know, we've added the turbos, different fittings of that sort. So it's always good, since everything's already drained out of this thing, we'll vacuum fill it. That way we don't have any unexpected bubbles that are in the system. So anytime you can do this, this is the best way of doing things. We've gone ahead, taken our 5-gallon bucket. We've filled it up with 2 gallons of coolant. We'll get our adapters on there, get this all in place, and we will begin vacuuming it. This is a little slippery. All right, so that. We'll start with these closed. This is our fill hose. This is gonna be our exhaust hose. We'll connect our shop air, and we'll go ahead and begin the vacuum process. So it's a little hard to hear, but if you look at the gauge, this is what you want to happen. Obviously, green is good. We want to kind of get into around the 25 inches of mercury, and you're gonna see how all the rubber vacuum lines, hoses, I should say, suck themselves shut. So it's just pulling all the air out of the entire system as best as it can. So we've already gotten into green, which is really good in a short amount of time. If you have a leak of some sort, or you forgot to tighten something down, this would let you know, basically. You wouldn't be able to create enough vacuum to get into the 20s. So you'd probably be somewhere in here in the 15s or 10s, depending on how severe the leak is. So this is also a good way of kind of a pre-check of knowing if your cooling system has a leak somewhere. So we'll go ahead and shut it. And it should hold vacuum. Again, if there is no leak, this will hold vacuum on its own for a while. And if you did have a leak somewhere, this would basically start to drop. So the next thing we're gonna do is prime our fill hose. Make sure that our hose is at the bottom. Our strainer's all the way down at the bottom of this bucket. We'll open it nice and slow. Okay, we're gonna close it. So this is already filled up a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and apply a little bit more vacuum. All right, so we've got this all primed up. Now we can go ahead and open our inlet, and you can see how it starts to drop. And right now it's pulling from this hose. So I'm keeping my hand down here so that I can make sure that the pickup and the strainer is at the very bottom of this, because obviously if you just let it come up, it's going to start sucking air, and then you've defeated the entire purpose of this tool. So it'll start to slowly come down, and once you get to 0, essentially it's totally full. So just keep an eye, make sure you have enough coolant in here. You don't want to run out of fluid. All right, guys, so we're at 0. We've used almost all of our 2 gallons of coolant. So there it is. We can pull this out of there. There's our strainer, our pickup. We're all done. Go ahead and shut this, disconnect our shop air. And even though I'm really confident in the system, we'll go ahead, we'll turn the heater on. We'll make sure to run it, and if there is any potential air pockets in there, we'll make sure we get rid of them. But again, this thing hasn't failed me. Really the best way of filling your cooling system up. Particularly very mandatory tool on the VR30 stuff when you're doing the heat exchanger. You need to do vacuum fill. Otherwise, you're gonna get way too many air pockets, and your heat exchanger system isn't gonna work in those vehicles. With our cooling system all filled up, these 2012 and newer 370Zs have an expansion tank. It's not just a overflow bottle. I see this as a common mistake, is guys using the improper radiator caps. So sometimes what I'll see is 2 pressurized caps being used or switched. So when you have an expansion tank like this on a 2012 and newer, you want to make sure that this cap that's on the engine isn't a pressurized cap. It's just a regular old cap. You want to make sure that you have this one here on the engine, and the one that's going to be pressurized is going to be on the expansion tank, right? So this car had an 88 kPa, kilopascal cap rating. We want to make sure it has the 137 kPa. I like to use factory Nissan caps. Whenever I test the caps, I found that these are the higher quality caps. They hold the pressure. Some of the aftermarket stuff, you pressure test them. We have a way to pressure test it. I'll find they don't even hold the advertised pressure rating. So the Nissans do at least this when they're brand new. So, and they hold up really well over time. So we're gonna get rid of the 88 kPa, put in our 137. It's a higher pressure rated cap, and we're good to go there. All right, now it's time to fill this bad boy up with engine oil. I've decided that I'm gonna use 5W50 from AMSOIL. This guy is gonna beat the shit out of this car. So I wanna make sure that we have some good protection of oil. So going thicker viscosity is gonna allow us to do that, and it's gonna be more stable because he is gonna be drifting and road racing this car. So it's a race car. It's gonna get beat on. We're not just gonna use 30 weight oil in this thing. That'd be a shame to do that. I don't use 30 weight oil in any of these cars. 40 weight is the lightest viscosity that we use at this shop. I like that AMSOIL makes a 5 winter weight. So oil pressure will get to those vital parts a lot quicker than say a 10 or a 15 or a 20 weight. So this is cool because it's a 5 and then it thickens up as a 50 weight viscosity once it's warmed up. Usually like to do this stuff or use AMSOIL's race-inspired versions of their oil, but this will fit the bill nicely on this application. We'll end up using AMSOIL Severe Gear in the differential on this thing, so we'll do the 75-140 offering, again, because the car is going to be abused. And for transmission fluid, believe it or not, I just like to use the factory Nissan MTF, the 75-85 spec. So we're going to do that next and work our way to the diff. All right, this is our last quart of oil. Once we get it running, we'll let it run for a good 15-20 seconds. We'll check the oil, shut it off. But in the meantime, we have another Nismo Z with a mid-mount turbo kit. We just did the boost control solenoid install on this bad boy. We're gonna go ahead and do one on that. So we got a plummet. This car came to us as is, installed already, all the parts. It just needs to get the solenoid hooked up, everything plumbed correctly. So we're gonna go ahead, we'll switch to that car next. All right, here's the mid-mount setup on this Nismo 370. They have the twin port configuration. We'll go ahead and set it up for that. We'll just confirm that everything's tightened up, that these other ports are capped off correctly, and we'll run our hoses. So this is where I was talking in the previous car that we did. You gotta be really careful. So we have way more length of hose we need to run. So we gotta be super, super careful too, because there's areas where it's gonna be running alongside the exhaust potentially. So this is where you have to be really careful. You can't have it too close because it'll melt it. Even it being with an air gap, you'll still melt it. There's just so much radiating heat coming off this stuff, especially if you're gonna be driving it hard on the track. So we're gonna go ahead and run our hoses. We'll figure out how we're gonna do it, and we'll get started with running hoses. We're gonna fill up our trans, nothing special here. Again, this is the Nissan MTF 7585. This is what I like to use in all of the manual transmission cars dating back into the 90s. You'll notice here that anytime we do like a big project like this, you want to label if there's fluid or not. So on this one, we put no fluid. So if somebody else jumps on it, somebody doesn't know, they can see clearly with our Sharpie, we said no fluid, exclamation point. So that way you're not expecting to have fluid in there if another tech's working on the car. So mistakes can happen and they can be costly if you have somebody that doesn't check to make sure that there's fluid in the transmission. And then what I like to do too is we'll put the date of when the transmission fluid was changed or replaced. So we'll get rid of this and put today's date on it. All right, so we're changing the diff fluid on this bad boy. You can see what I was talking about, the abuse. Look at that magnetic drain plug. Look at all that fuzz on there. So fluid's nice and dark. Look at that thing. So we'll go ahead and get this cleaned up, and we're gonna use the AMSOIL. All right, guys, we're gonna be also installing the Fast Tensions catback. This is a 2.5 inch, dual 2.5. The downpipes go from 3 inch and they cone back down to 2.5, so it'll mate up perfectly, no turbulence. And then the X pipe is gonna be the 18 inch resonated X pipe. This setup will sound really nice, really quiet, but still aggressive. So we'll go ahead and get this stuff installed. All right, we're in the middle of an AEM twin turbo kit. Super notorious for this hose to just get burnt to crisp by the exhaust manifold. I mean, if you look at it here, right? So we've replaced the hose, we have our fire sleeve, and we have our heat wrap over this. You'll notice that, I mean, if something can easily push against the hose, against the manifold, we've got these really cool little brackets that we use. What we're gonna end up doing is zip tying it up so that you have much bigger gap. So this air gap is gonna make a big difference. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take off this bolt here, slip our bracket through it. If I remember, guys, I'll let you know. We'll put it in a link on where I got these. These are really bitchin'. I use this just for just about anything you wanna mount out of the way. So we can zip tie. It's got a nice little place for the zip tie. You can use stainless wire. We'll probably end up doing stainless wire because it's gonna see a shit ton of heat, but we're gonna keep it up in place like this for now until we get our wire in. But you can see, look at that. Look at how much better that is. And it's stuff like this you gotta pay attention to when you're doing custom installs like this that sometimes the manufacturer of the kit doesn't think about, right? So that's gonna get us way more life out of this hose. So we've wrapped up the Defi gauge install. Pretty simple install. We've got a company that makes the holder for the gauge pods here. And then we've got oil pressure, our boost. I like it because it matches the red of the factory gauges. So it looks pretty factory. A lot of guys, or some guys I wouldn't say a lot, but some people actually install them up here, which is pretty cool. We've done that before. It just takes a shit ton of work to do and to get it nice and clean looking. But this does the job. One downside of it is you can't close it, unfortunately. So a bit of a pain to get because a lot of the stuff that Defi offers now is discontinued. They don't make it anymore. So Defi is one of my favorite gauge companies. Very accurate, super high quality. All right, so we've wrapped up the Fast Intentions twin turbo install. Got it on the dyno, did really, really well. 91 octane flex fuel vehicle, ready to hit the track with this bad boy. 91 octane. We did with 492 wheels, so almost 500 of the tire, roughly about 10 pounds of boost. And on E85, we got it up to about 630 wheel, keeping our torque low, right below 500 foot-pounds. Keep those rods happy. So again, we'll recap this thing. Fast Intentions stage 1 twin turbo kit, all the CJM fuel fittings and everything, and fuel system that we've got in there, the billet hat. It does have the Fast Intentions return fuel system in there. We put our catch can setup on it, so it's gonna be a track vehicle. Yeah, really pleased with the results. This is the one we installed the gauges, so we'll show those in action. Yeah, it's gonna be a blast on the track.